'Cause these are my people, and this is my land. This is what we pray for.
Using nefarious intent network.
Well, you've talked about password.
If you ain't
In an attempt to keep it hidden,
you won't understand. This is my country.
Weekly Geo-Political News and Analysis. By Benjamin Fulford. To the Qualified Observers, July 18, 2022. Countdown to U.S. implosion begins after failure of Biden Mid-East trip. The fake U.S. President Biden failed to get oil on his recent begging trip to the Middle East. This means the countdown for the implosion of the U.S. and Western Europe has begun. Revolution is in the air and there will be no turning back, multiple sources agree. Biden's handlers hope to use Iran as an enemy in order to justify massive arms sales in exchange for oil. Saudi ambassador to Washington Rema bint Bandar Al Saud summed up the region's thinking when she dismissed the oil for security paradigm as outdated and reductionist. No weapons for oil means no oil for the U.S. and its client states. No oil means no economic activity. The Khazarian mafia, meanwhile, like a dying beast, is spitting out fear porn, bio-weapons and threatening war in a desperate effort to stave off the inevitable. However, their medical mafia is being systematically hunted down and killed, as this video media shows. Let us now look at the real meaning of Biden's visit to the Middle East. His failure to get continued free oil in exchange for money printed out of nothing is going to have ramifications far beyond the United States. It will mean the end of the BIS, the UN, the EU, and perhaps even the papacy. To understand why this is, we need to review a little bit of background material. First, the BIS, or Central Bank of Central Banks, was founded in 1930 using Asian gold. This gold was lent to the Germans to help them pay their obligations under the Treaty of Versailles signed at the end of World War I. In exchange, the Asians were promised the United Nations would be set up as a world parliament with the ancient royal families of East and West, the Dragon family, acting as background supervisors. However, at the end of World War II, the victorious Allies reneged on their promise to spend the gold that was lent to them to develop the entire planet. Instead, their Marshall Plan only developed the countries they controlled, now known as the G7. In retaliation, the Asians cut off any further access to their gold. When the US ran out of gold, we had the Nixon shock of 1971. That is when the dollar was decoupled from gold. Instead, the countries of the world had to use dollars to buy oil. This was a giant sugar high to the US. The countries of the world had to have a trade surplus with the US in order to buy oil. This led to a strong dollar and free money for the Americans. However, the result was US industry lost its competitiveness, and over 50 years of trade deficits turned the US into the most indebted country in world history. Then finally the rest of the world decided to stop lending money to the US in 2008, leading to the Lehman shock. The Americans were able to buy time then by promising to put a black communist in as president. At this point, readers need to know that communism was created by the Vatican, or should I say the P2 Freemasons who control the Vatican, and that Obama is their house slave. In any case, the Obama ruse convinced the Asians to hand over 700 tons of gold to the Federal Reserve Board under Alan Greenspan. This was leveraged over 1,000-fold to create $23 trillion that kept the United States of America Corporation going until 2020. When the money ran out in January of 2020, the Khazarian mafia-controlled West responded with a massive bio-weapons and vaccine attack. They hoped to murder enough people so that they could stay in power. This effort has failed. They also managed to get some funding for the U.S. corporation by promising to bring back Barack Obama with Joe Biden acting as his front man. Now, as a result of general disgust with the antics of the fake Biden regime, this money has been cut off. This is the background to the truly historic events that are unfolding before our eyes. In the news, this can be seen in the fall of multiple governments and the isolation of the G7 from the rest of the world economy. We talked to a Dragon family representative about this situation. He said there were a series of emergency meetings in Switzerland last week between representatives of the Vatican and the Dragon family. As a result of this, all the gold in Swiss bank vaults has been returned to the Asian royal families who own it, the source says. The gold is now in Hong Kong, he notes. This was gold that was lent to establish the BIS and other related gold, such as the gold stolen from the Qing royal family, he says. The Pope was supposed to meet a Dragon family representative to talk about the situation last week in Switzerland, but he was recalled at the last minute due to the fall of the Draghi government in Italy, he said. Now the Pope is expected to meet a Dragon family representative in Canada when he flies there next week, he continues. The Pope will soon be getting a new set of marching orders, he says. The other thing the Dragon family representative had to say was that all the top secret financial codes are going to be changed and all those people who do not receive the new codes will be killed as traitors, the source promises. We looked for independent confirmation the legendary Swiss gold vaults were empty and we found this partial confirmation. The Swiss central bank primarily stores its gold, and that of foreign central banks and the Bank for International Settlements, on Bundesplatz 1 in the capital Bern. This vault may be one of the largest globally. However, due to a renovation, the vault is now empty. The metal has temporarily been transferred to a federal bunker near Kandersteg, deep in the Swiss mountains. To this writer, it sounds like an excuse to explain to physical gold dealers why the vaults are empty. We also found out that a plan by the Austrian Central Bank to move 50 tons of their gold from London to Switzerland announced in 2015 has not taken place. The Austrian Central Bank explains this as follows. We can confirm that the relocation has been postponed. However, we are not allowed to disclose any details in order to comply with contractual obligations to keep the business secrets of external partners involved. There is plenty of open source news to confirm the BIS, the UN, the IMF, the World Bank and their United States of America Corporation have run out of money. That is why money promised by the IMF to places like Pakistan and Sri Lanka never materializes. Then we see the euro, the Japanese yen and other currencies plunging against the US dollar at a rate not seen in over 20 years. On the surface, this would be a sign, as the corporate propaganda media would have it, that the US is strong. However, what is really happening is that the US Federal Reserve Board cannot print any new dollars because they are not being accepted by the rest of the world. Only the dollars earned in the past by countries that had trade surpluses with the US are accepted. This means there is a limited amount of dollars available and that is why the dollar is strong. US corporate client states like Japan and the EU are pumping out yen and euros to try to keep their master afloat. However, the result of all this money pumping is the plunge in the value of these currencies now being seen. The US can still pump fiat money into its domestic economy, which is why the real inflation rate, as calculated by Shadow Stats, reached 17.4% in June. This is in a country with a real unemployment rate of 24.3%. The situation is so bad that even people with full-time jobs are being forced by inflation to go to food banks.
Today we distributing the food and we try to assist the families as much as we can. It's a mess. Before we used to see probably only seniors. Now it's families, now it's seniors, people with disabilities. So yes, it's been an increase.
What brings us out here today is through MAOF delivering food to the families to make us happy and supply us with food because of our high inflation. The prices of food are so high and they're going up higher every day. And we're senior citizens, and I'm so glad that they're able to help us.
For 2022, we're expecting things to really start sliding down in terms of the demand for food assistance. But really, with the inflation hit, we saw another upsurge. What we're hearing from people and families is they're making these decisions between filling their gas tank to get to work, paying the rent, paying utilities, other basic expenses, and meeting their food costs. So they need to seek food from a food pantry or some distribution program to try to make ends meet.
Meanwhile, the US government under the fake Biden is acting like a junkie, taking everything in his house to a pawn shop in order to keep going. That is why Biden has been selling oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to China. It is also why US weapons stocks are being sold on black markets around the world under the excuse they are being sent to Ukraine. As these pictures of the real and fake White Houses confirm, the entire so-called US government under Biden is a giant psyops at this point. We were sent a photograph of a Nostradamus prediction about these events as seen below. We could not actually find this in the Nostradamus works we consulted online, but it still reflects the current situation very well. In a sign the US is headed for revolution. Opinion polls show average confidence across all institutions in US at new low of 27%. The lowest of the low is Congress with only 7% support. Regimes are already toppling in Europe. Boris Johnson has been removed in the UK. Former EU Central Bank head Mario Draghi has been removed in Italy, and the head of the government of Estonia has left. Now we have this news from France. Macron ordered to resign as French president faces urgent probe after betraying France.
With over 100 million users across 40 countries, it's become the world's largest ride-sharing app. But a trove of leaked confidential files show that Uber used potentially unethical methods to fuel its rapid global expansion. Obtained by The Guardian, the cache of 124,000 documents that's being dubbed the Uber files reveals that the tech giant flouted laws, lobbied governments, and even courted politicians to force its services around the globe, with a particular ally found in France's President Emmanuel Macron, causing other French politicians to accuse him of looting the country.
These are damning revelations about the active role played by Emmanuel Macron, then a minister, to facilitate the development of Uber in France. It's against all our rules, all our social rights, and against workers' rights.
Whilst French taxi drivers protested against Uber, the leak shows Macron championed the country's growth in Paris and was on first-name terms with co-founder Travis Kalanick.
The French parliament has also rejected Macron's plan for vaccine passports designed to turn the entire country into an animal farm. The lack of energy is also shutting down the economies of Europe. The head of the municipal works of Chemnitz, Roland Warner, said that annual gas bills of €1,500 could rise to €4,700 in October. If we get social unrest, the state won't be able to cope. We are facing the biggest crisis the country has ever had. We have to be honest and say, first of all, we will lose the prosperity that we have had for years, warned Rainer Dulger, head of the Confederation of German Employers Associations. France, meanwhile, is being forced to turn off its street lights at night because its energy grid is failing. France's nuclear reactors, which produce 25% of all power in Western Europe, are operating at only 46% capacity. Last week, power prices jumped 18% to €500 a megawatt hour, the highest weekly close on record. Similar situations are being seen in Italy, Hungary, etc. The bankrupt Western countries are using fake environmental regulations to hide the fact they can no longer afford to pay for fertilizer. This is causing farmers in Argentina, Italy, Spain, Poland, and elsewhere to join Dutch farmers in massive worldwide protests.
hicieron el kilómetro 83 de la ruta 14.
The crisis in Europe is affecting the rest of the world as desperate Europeans outbid developing countries for fertilizer and energy inputs. Europe's LNG imports soared 49% from the start of the year to mid-June. Pakistan's imports fell by 15% during the same period. Those to India shed 16%, and China's LNG imports fell by more than a fifth. This is leading to social instability in many countries from Sri Lanka, to Pakistan, to Panama to China. In China, the implosion of the real estate market is leading to a citizen-enforced jubilee or debt cancellation. That is why home buyers in over 50 cities have stopped paying mortgages on over 100 projects across China As this happens, the world is busy building up BRICS as an alternative to Western-dominated institutions like the G7 and the UN. It has already been reported that Argentina, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Turkey have applied to join the BRICS grouping. Our Dragon family source says that Indonesia is now also on board. In Japan, meanwhile, the collapse of the post-war slave regime is now looking inevitable. Last week, when the Japanese government held a funeral for the assassinated slave Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, not a single world leader showed up. This means the world knows he was not a real leader but just a slave. We also got a call from someone very close to Abe who told us the real Abe died 2 years ago. The source confirmed the assassination was street theater designed to manipulate public opinion. Speaking about street theater, let us now conclude with the latest optics from Project Bluebeam. Some of it looks like shows being put on by conventional drones. However, a lot of it remains mysterious. As usual with such stuff, while we find it fascinating, it is still not affecting our real here-now lives. It is going to be up to us humans to liberate the planet.
The hell? Looks like a freaking battle. Whoa! Welcome to Las Vegas.
'Cause these are my people, and this is my land. This is what we pray for, and this is God's plan. If you ain't from here, then you won't understand. This is my country, and this is who I am.